Yeah,
Not 20
we're in a
seconds.
we're in a tight schedule,
20
huh?
seconds.
Yeah.
Did you know you have 20
Well,
seconds?
well, thank you, everyone, for gracing us with your presence. Both here, our panelists, and yourselves for coming down to the Atlantic Radical Book Fair, which I guess the ninth in a row, or ninth annual. So we're going to be talking about, yes, the future is physical. Don't let anybody lie to you. Here we have a couple of panelists to start this conversation, and then we'll eventually open it up for anyone who would like also to converse. So first, at the very end here, Dr. Shady Radical is the founder and lead archivist, of the Radical Archive Project. She describes herself as a social construction, a theory of liberation, an approach to preservation, and a mothering body. Her creative practice involves preserving Black memory, production culture, and women's work as she approaches performance as a site of inquiry in order to activate silences and erasures attributed to forms of subjugation. Currently, she is teaching African diaspora and the world at Spelman College and conducting archival skills workshops and speaking at universities, conferences, and private institutions about their own preservation practices. She is passionate about exposing young people to careers in preservation while establishing standards, procedures, and protocols for caring for, building on, and creating access to our nation's most valuable historical materials that live inside and outside of our bodies. Currently, she's working with a Balethnic Dance Company in East Point, Georgia, and Bwagwamoyo Africulture in Tanzania on new and innovative ways to bridge and fortify memory and diasporic relationships across vast geographic locations. Immediately to my left here, Ashby Kombahi has been an archivist and librarian at the Highlander Research and Education Center for the last 4.5 years, and also co-founded the local oral history project, Georgia Dusk, which has been documenting the Black-led reproductive justice movement. They were initiated into the archives through a music library. There, he fell in love with with physical sound recordings from cassette tapes, vinyls, 8-track tapes, CDs, MP3s, jump drives, and he grew up scrapbooking family, where each family trip was memorialized with image descriptions and all. And in the middle here is Cam Hunt, a former librarian and a current cultural critic, archivist, and founder of the Free Black Library. A graduate of Cal Arts, they were encouraged to start their own library after witnessing the removal of books from the South. The Free Black Library is a digital archive with a physical collection, and they plan community events in Atlanta and Nashville. Since the launch, the Free Black Library has successfully had a series of Black-centered events, including an archivist meetup and film screenings, and much more. So welcome. Thank you. To our distinguished panelists. I guess right off the bat, why? I mean, I have my phone, I got my Kindle, I can watch any movie on the planet. I can read anything I ever want to read, whether it's a blog or a book. Why is the physical media so important for you personally? And why should it be important to anybody?
Not a small question to start off with at all. I think there's a myriad of reasons of why I've been so dedicated to making sure that the things that I love the most, I have physical copies of. For one, I feel like maybe generationally, there's always a fear of a mass Wi-Fi shutdown. Does anyone else have that paranoia? Yeah. So that's always lingering, first and foremost. I think also growing up a kid in New Orleans, not having access to power or certainly the internet for extended periods of time, I've just learned to have my physical things with me, especially books. I think that's one big piece. The other piece, too, that's come up for me repeatedly, as someone who has been quite loyal to Apple Music and had listened to most of my music over that platform, one too many times has my favorite song and artist been taken away from the streaming platform. And not only would it have been taken away from Apple Music, but then suddenly I can't find it anywhere. And that has really put the fire under me to make sure that I get my music in some other format. I'm quite loyal to vinyl, just because I like the artwork much bigger and better. But yeah, I think that's been two particular instances that's maybe been like, oh, I need to have this in the physical.
Um, yeah, I'll go next.
Sure.
I think for me personally, generationally, books have been such a big part of my life. By generationally, I mean literally. Like my mom was a librarian, was a retired librarian from Gilman School, and my cousin was also a librarian, and I have another cousin that was also a librarian. So it was kind of, I grew up around books, and I was just raised around physical media. And I was also raised by multiple Black elders in my family. And I don't know if you've ever met one. They keep a lot of things. That is their whole thing. There's actually a quote that was going around Twitter like a while ago that was like, for a lot of Black women, their first experiences with a museum is their grandma's home. I think that's very real for me, and that's that's why I strive to hold on to physical media, because for our elders, they trigger stories, right? And if you are someone that grows up in a family of Black elders, unfortunately, that means that a lot of them are gone. And so, who do we have left then to tell these stories? Like, what evidence do we have that these things actually happened? And with the rampant uprising of like misinformation and rewriting history, more than ever, that's why we need to hold on to our physical media. The truth lies within physical media.
Yeah, my ideas around physical media are very much related to CAMS. When I think about preservation, I'm thinking about ritual and tradition and the craft part of it. So clothing and textiles and quilts and the things that we make with our hands, whether that be written, textual documents or things that you are creating with others in a circle, like they teach us who we are. So without those things, I feel like we start to lose grasp of our identities. So I am also thinking about performance and preservation of the body. I think without, keep saying that the body is important, like the Black body is important, the Black body needs to be preserved. We also lose value there. So when I'm thinking about physical, it is less about books and like the physical parts of digital media, and it's more about craft, ritual, tradition, things that we're actually making with our hands and reinforcing who we are as a people.
I really like all these answers. I feel like I definitely identify with that. Particularly, I guess I'll go one by one. Where, I grew up in Puerto Rico, and the same thing. Going to my grandma's house, it was a whole aesthetic experience, where really you see the embodiment of memory. There was one corner where my grandma had basically, she was Catholic, and so she had all sorts of, to me at the time when I was little, spooky, like little images and things, but it was very much a bodily thing, like a space. Here's a space that you enter, you have these things. But I feel like already with my mother's family, that was, there was a certain optimism in the boomers that any new type of thing kind of, is embraced automatically, and sort of leads me to my next question then, because I feel like there's this aspect of losing the bodily to be replaced with even things that we do cherish, is collecting, for example, CDs. Right now I have a bunch of CDs, but some of them, either when you get scratched or something, the replacement, or even I heard this recently too. Apparently, some video games, after a while, you can have it for a pretty good shelf life, but after a while, the memory that's stored in there just disappears. So the actual master is stored somewhere in somebody's computer. The people who programmed it, the people who produced it. So then, how do you manage then that tension between like what you have in some instances, right? Because I think the bodily things are preserved in a much more, I don't know, infinite way, but these transactional items like CDs, MP3, 8-tracks, cassettes, not MP3s, how do you manage then, number one, keeping the space, like how do you manage not becoming a hoarder, I guess?
I can go first this time. I'm not going to answer your question, but I have some other thoughts.
I mean, we could just like chat. I'm
'Cause
just,
I
you
don't
know.
know. But let me tell you about how many bootlegs I have, right? That I know there's nothing on those bootlegs anymore. But I also can't throw away these bootlegs. Like, I have this huge container that says Black movies that I inherited. And it's like the bootlegs from way back. Also, like when I started thinking about preservation, I was working at Tyler Perry Studios, and you know the bootleg culture around his plays, right? Like where you could go to the bootleg man and get a play, like that. On the corner in front of the Kroger. And so that was always really exciting to me, especially moving here to Atlanta where like, you know, I just started collecting bootlegs because I was out of my parents' house and bootlegs was not a thing in my parents' house. So I was like feeling kind of, and then there was the times where I got the bootleg and there was nothing on it, right? Like I went home, tried to play it, and there was nothing on it, and I went back to the bootleg man, and he was like,
No, that's the European version. You gotta have a different DVD player, you know. So yeah, that's the excuse probably.
I was trying to return the bootleg, and he was like, "There's no returns." Right? And I was like, "But," and he was like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Okay." So I have that anxiety all the time, but there is something about, again, preserving the culture in that, or what, like, there's the memory of, you know, going to the bootleg man that I'm trying to like hold on to. You know, if that disc that doesn't work anymore goes away, then that's somehow that part of our culture goes away. So I think about that when it comes to like other people's materials and working with institutions and, you know, prioritizing digitization. But like if I really, you know, think about what might be on these VHSs and beta and what might not be, I could like, you know, probably send myself into psychosis, you know, and I'd rather not. So I try to, you know, think about the activity around the thing and like how we can preserve that first.
I want to come back to that because I'm really attracted to the almost mystical quality that you're describing. But yeah, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was the question again? I was so wrapped up in the bootleg.
No,
man.
I mean,
I was
if
like,
we
no,
want to keep
because
moving.
so I'm from Baltimore, so I know all about the bootleg man. And there's a Gatorade woman, and there's a keychain man who sells keychains on the corner. Like I'm very familiar with all of that culture. But that does tie into physical things, right? Because it is someone selling you something, and it's like you could just go to the dollar store very easily, or to another store and get that thing. But it's the conscious idea, right, of that you have the $5 to $10 in your hand. You know for a fact this is not going to a corporation. It's going to the Gatorade woman at the corner that like needs to pay for something for her kids. So when you buy, you know, $1 cigarette from her, or like a $5 bottle of Gatorade, she's taking that money and she's going back to like probably support like her several grandkids. So yeah, I think it's like when we lose physical media, we also lose those mystical, magical interactions, like what you were talking about with the bootleg man. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so much of it also is relational, and the same with that you're talking, Shady, around, you know, inheriting this big box of materials. I think similarly around the question of like how do we avoid the hoarding is, I think the physical media for me has been a lot of like an exchange, right? My mom has all of the VHS tapes of our family time when, you know, having a camcorder was the thing. And largely it's because, once again, I live in hurricane zone, and that our house is the one house that survived all the floodwaters. Much to my wife's chagrin, I have been taking those tapes back home and like slowly helping her not be a hoarder by taking it into my house.
But passing on the tradition, let's call it that, you know.
And through that too, though, have been like the VHSs I've been digitizing and putting on USB drives, and also on cloud drive so that other family members have access to it. So then it becomes kind of like a web of like, here I have one copy, but I'm gonna make sure there's multiple copies, and I'm gonna just make sure everybody else has it. And so what I've appreciated most about physical media in general, but especially these VHS tapes, is that it allows for this like, it allows the relationships to become continuous and to really like build into them, because I'm giving copies to everyone, and we know where the master copy comes from, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, thank you so much for bringing back up the question. I think hoarding is inevitable, but how do we change hoarding because hoarding stems from trauma, right? How do we change hoarding into collecting? Because then we have community. If you have a collection, you can share that with someone. They can also share their collection with you.
When does that transition happen then? How do you know, when does it become collecting?
Oh, when I was sitting alone in my house watching movies by myself, that was when I realized I needed to start having film screenings. Yes, 100%. I was like, I'm having all of these really good thoughts. What I think are good thoughts, I don't know, because I'm writing the whole dissertation by myself, right? Because at this moment, when I moved to rural Tennessee, earlier this year, I had no community. I didn't know anyone. And so I'm just like sitting in my house watching all these like very Black, very gay movies, and I'm like, I don't have anyone to talk to about it except for my friends in Atlanta, and it's like, that's nice, but they're not here. And so that was kind of when I had the realization of okay, it's time to start creating events around this thing where then we can then expand the conversation. And that was the idea behind the first film screening. And after that, it was like all of these different people coming together with different ideas and questions about a movie that I've seen many, many times before. But there were different things that they noticed that like I didn't notice because I had just been sitting by myself in my room watching The Watermelon Woman.
So I guess building on that, I want to ask, how do you feel? I mean, I feel like community's become such a buzzword it's used in so many different contexts and in ways that I feel like almost destroy what it means, because what you've expressed to me seems like you're building community on the physical, and to me there's something deeply intimate, and you cannot imitate that anywhere. But there's also some people have communities online, right? You have a Discord channel, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, these are my friends that I do X and Y activity with, or certain interests, etc. But then it's like, I feel like I don't know, personally speaking, there's a certain lack of depth that the lack of physicality in those spaces don't have. How do you then, translating back to the topic of actual resources, how do you see the differences in community building from physical resources like books, music, even watching a live event on music? That's way different than, oh, hey, we're all going to congregate on Zoom and watch this, concert that whatever. How do you see those communities? In what ways do they complement each other? In what ways are they different? Do you see any priorities being had in one space versus another? I hope that makes sense.
I'm seeing a growing community of Black creatives, Black artists, and Black writers on Substack, actually, which is really, really comforting. Because I think when I first heard about it, there were some, and there's still some controversies around who Substack actually supports. They do have people on there that are from the right, and that's extremely unfortunate. But it's beautiful to see that this group of Black people on there have found each other, and they're teaching classes on there, y'all. They've created curriculums. They're building their own archives. It really is its own little world on there, and it's been really cool to see people connect. And the Free Black Library, we're actually having in January the first meeting of our book club. I decided to go ahead and make that virtual and put it on Substack. And so I'm gonna see how that plays out, but I think it's been really cool to see that specifically. It actually reminds me of what Tumblr was when it first started, right? Yeah, it was like that. It was an online community, but there are people that I know that are that was my Tumblr friend, and then we met in real life, and we've been friends for 10 years.
I think my mind went to Tumblr as well as you were asking the question, and so I'm happy you brought that back up. As I think about the question, I definitely am realizing my own biases. I think there's nothing replaceable about like in-person physical community, and that oftentimes the type of digital space can be an introduction to making those deeper in-person relationships. And so I think about that a lot around like how I've gotten politicized, particularly as a black feminist, how I've gotten introduced to a rich queer history is through some of these digital communities of like sharing photographs of historic black feminist figures, especially those that were photographed by Jeb and other like Gene Weisinger and photographers of those sorts. And I'm seeing these photographs for the first time. I'm like, whoa, these people are in relationship with each other. Audre Lorde knew Pat Parker. So that's a digital connection, right? And then I'm going into physical spaces such as Garrett's Books and More, and I'm seeing photographs of people, like bell hooks sitting at the dinner table or at the book counter with all of these folks that with these elders who are still here in Atlanta that I know and just really, really respect and honor. And so I feel like the kind of introduction that these digital communities have provided allows me to go and find the spaces, find the people, find the hubs where I can dig deeper into some of those relationships. I think the other thing too, I'm mentioning spaces like Harris Books and More, but I'm also thinking about like lesbian herstory archives, these spaces that are like repositories of physical materials. And so much of what we see online is kind of like a snapshot. And then you're in the space, you're in the archive, and now you're like digging into the whole book, and now you're digging into the whole manuscript. Now you're seeing all the notes in the margins, and so yeah, to me it's like a gateway into really digging deeper and deeper and deeper into that community.
But I really like that example, like when you go to a bookstore, the exploration way of seeing things is just trigger, or even a library. Whereas if you go to like a online bookstore, oh, I just found my book, click, got it. And we recommend, but let's be real. What percentage of the time do you actually go into the recommended? But when you're in the presence of something, yeah, absolutely.
So when I think about community first, like I'm still thinking about just the word. I think about how I try to teach my daughter about community. She is in so many different community spaces, right? She was going to private school, and it's very LGBT, like pro activism. They walk the pride parade every year. Everybody calls each other by their first name. And then she is at Balethnic, her dance community, and they're very, very, very black, and you don't call anybody by their first name. It's like Miss so-and-so, Mr. so-and-so. And then she travels with me every year to Bagamoyo in Tanzania, and that's her community as well. And so my, I guess, ideas are trying to like teach her about the norms and possibilities and rituals and traditions of each of these spaces, and how she can navigate the world in a very informed way, because I expect her to follow the rules of all of these spaces, right? But she gets to be different people too, and the same person. So I really enjoy kind of just moving through these spaces and seeing who I become and who they become to me. So then thinking about the digital communal spaces, it usually follows the physical community for me. I'm not as active on social media, so I do spend time every few months with the group in Bagamoyo online, right? We have these, what's supposed to be 1 hour Zoom meetings, become 3 hour Zoom meetings because it's Swahili, and then the culture, and it'd be a lot. But then also like during COVID, where, my group of friends, we met online, like every week and like just tried to stay connected. Like, what can we do to just stay, friends? So that's I love like what community kind of does for me, like the digital sphere, because it keeps us together. And it allows me to learn new things about myself, That's what I'm thinking.
So it's transformative in a way. Yeah, I really like that perspective. I had one more practical question because I really want to go into the spiritual stuff because I'm kind of like, especially when it comes to these things, I'm a little bit of a mystic. I really do believe there's like I don't know, like real Borehead style. There's a mystical quality to not just the book, but even a record, right? Like Prince, for example, would usually, when he recorded, you usually get the first try of something because he understood there was energy behind it. And when you transfer that to the recording, you feel that. Whereas other people that have like super produced albums that, when you hear it, you're not listening to like that raw of like, this is the first time this is being played. And so I feel like there's a quality there, right? That's definitely spiritual. But yeah, let me do the practical question first before I start ranting. So you mentioned earlier about things being lost in hurricanes, which I'm intimately familiar with, and as well as not just in Puerto Rico, but here I had a flooding in my apartment that I scrambled to rescue as many things. When something like that happens, how do you have a list of priorities that you're like, in case of emergency, click, this goes first, blah, blah, blah. Or, is that something you even plan for as you're acquiring new things, acquiring new media? Do you take that into account in your personal collection, necessarily into your professional life or anything? And,
Great question, and a great question for me to like be a little bit self-evaluative, because I'm like, do I do all the things that I need to do to protect my collections? Other than, first rule that every archivist knows is like, don't have your materials flat on the floor, right? And so everything is in shelving that's at least 4 inches off the floor. So that's priority number one, right, in terms of flooding. But I think, there are some things that we've done. Like, for example, in my family, we do some scrapbooking. Not as frequently as I want to, but that's a tradition that I've grown up on, right? Those scrapbooks exist, like they're stored in a fire-safe box. Is it fire-safe for true? I don't know. I've never tested it. But the marketing says fireproof. Those are some of the precautions that we have, and I think just having like a little bit of a mental inventory of like what is in my home, like what are some of the most valuable things. On the professional end of things, I wasn't at my job when the fire happened, but 2 years before I got to the Highlander Center, which is located in East Tennessee, there was an arson attack on the main office building. The main office building was completely burned to the ground by a white supremacist who was just arrested earlier this year. And within that, we lost a ton of stuff. But there wasn't a clear inventory of it because it hadn't been processed in the archive yet. Within that, also in the building, we lost our digital server. And the server is where everything was backed up. Not on a cloud, but on the physical server. And so that has set a whole new set of standards for us in the workplace. I think one of the key things that's come up with it is, yes, there's a little bit of an inventory of like what has existed, what is like an outline of it. But in terms of the physical, is that we realized so many people had copies of things that we thought was only one. And so when we put a call out to community, it was like, this fire happened, we think we lost program files from years, 2003 to 2019. Who has what? Community members just flooded in and started bringing their copies of, program agendas and photographs and things like that. Yeah, I mean, talk about the ways that, physical media can bring community together. It was really incredible. And so we were able to recover some things. And I think about that a lot, is if we do have materials, making sure that there are multiple copies of physical material and that it is widely distributed, because when in time in crisis, you never know who will have a backup. And then the other piece, of course, with our digital server, which any digital archive, any digital library will have a server, is that we make sure that there are two servers that have the exact same things on it. One is on site in an undisclosed location. The other is off site and is backed up on a cloud server. And so those are things that like we've set as safeguards. But I've been scarred, you know. Like they're
It is traumatic. Speaking of trauma, it really, really is. Yeah.
yeah. And it's things that I'm thinking about all the time, especially in a community of professional archivists. Just figuring out we are continually going to experience climate catastrophe. So having to really find safeguards, and it's like archives may burn down, but I think I come to peace with that. I think really the multiple copies and it being widely dispersed is one of the biggest takeaways I'm feeling right now.
Yeah, I think, I agree with you. Also, I heard about that happening, and I'm so sorry. I had no idea, and it's wild meeting you today. But that made me think about, and the question also makes me think about the first things that we grabbed when I was a kid, and our apartment burned down. The apartment building burned down because someone was doing something with a candle. They left the fan on, you know, whole building went up. But I remember, you know, being a little archivist that I was like, I have to get my Barbies, I have to get my pink coat, and I have to get all my pictures. And I just remember still being like at that age, still being like the VHS and the pictures, the Toy Story VHS and the pictures are so important. They have to come with us. So I'm stuffing. There's like, you know, smoke filling in, and my mom's like, hurry up. And I'm like stuffing stuff into my little, you know, backpack. And then the firefighters come in, they're like, we're ready to go. Like, did you get the stuff that you need to get? Because we have to go now. And it was such a bad fire that like, it was on the news, and you can probably find some type of footage. But it's so funny. There's a clip of me in my little pink coat. There's a clip of me in my little pink coat, like in front of the apartment building, just like playing, because I knew that our home was gone, but I kind of still didn't know that our home was gone. I was like, I don't know, it felt real, but it also felt like a dream, but I still had the sense enough to be like, I need to grab these things. And so that's still ingrained in me in a way. Like even now in Tennessee, when I hear, you know, the siren. When I hear the siren, I grab the photos first. I'm like, get the album. I like scream at my partner. I'm like, get that box with all the pictures. Yes, all of them. And I think pictures are so important to me in that way, trying to hold on to them because, yes, we have our phones, we have other things we can take pictures with, but it's just like, what happens when you break your phone, right? If you didn't back up those pictures, they are gone. And so.
And that's the other thing too. Like I take a ton of pictures, especially now that I have a kid. It's just like picture, but then it becomes like, well, okay, they just live in this ethereal space. When they, you know, the plan is eventually like have them in some type of physical form, but it's that transition. I feel like it's very hard to actually do because you feel relatively safe when things are tucked away in, you know, the all-knowing cloud. But yeah.
I don't know the answers to these questions.
No, I mean,
I am not
just
prepared.
Express yourself.
Man, I have little catastrophes every day. Especially working with under-resourced communities. It's about performance, right? So I work with Black performance companies and artists, and they do not have the budget for any of this that we're talking about. So whatever I do is like the record. So every year I go back to Tanzania, and every year I buy them an external drive, and every year we document the festival and we back it up, and I also buy myself an external drive, and I bring it back here and I put it on my iDrive and I back it up and everything. And then when I come back next year, I'm like, okay, let's see what you've collected over there. They say, doctor, the drive is dead. And I'm like, okay. So that copy that I got is the only copy. And it gives me a little bit of a heart attack, to constantly be the official repository when this has not been. I told them I am not the repository. But like, what do you do, right? Like, you have to, which brings me to this point, like, their archives become my archive. And I do not know how to separate that line. If anyone has any advice, let me know. But when you care about people, the culture, the community, you end up taking that in your own life. Even though my mission is to teach people to do this work, how do you not keep a copy, right? When I got the program today, I was like, okay, I'm gonna take 3. Sorry, just, because you got to have the one you can actually touch, and then the one and the other one too. It's just my life now, right? So y'all are in my archive now. I know y'all saw me taking pictures. Like, all right, I'm just gonna take this. But I feel like I'm doing it for all of us, right? Like, so maybe one day you'll be like, hey, do you still have that picture? When we were at that, at Auburn talking about books. And I could be like, I hope so. But yeah, so it's anxiety, man. It's anxiety all day, every day. And like, which for me, the care of the body, those rituals, the self-care is as important as the collecting, the describing, the arranging, the breathing, then taking the moment and like releasing, all of the ways that we are surviving, that's what it becomes about for me.
So that's a perfect transition. And the following is not, I don't know if I have a question, but I'm just going to express some things, and let's come together and see what. But I really, for example, I think what I mentioned earlier about Prince, there's energy, and we all know this. There's energy moving you, sometimes from outside of you, and that's where the cleansing comes in. All these things, but I also think these energies live in objects, and the most concrete way that most of us can understand it is a picture. You take a picture of someone, and let's say that someone passes away, having that picture becomes so much more precious. And somehow it's a direct channel to not only the memory, but the person themselves, right? And I also believe this about handwriting too. Like, for example, as a little biographical note, my grandfather had Alzheimer's, so every time I would try to ask him about his experiences during World War II, I couldn't get anything out of him. But I found these letters that some random German lady wrote him. And they were all in German, so I couldn't read it. So I learned a little bit of German just so I could read it. But it was through these letters that I almost had this connection with this lady, like through my grandfather's experience that he couldn't tell me. But now it's like, it's a mystery, and it's like, oh man. And I feel like maybe that drove me to work in libraries and archives. But I do think, like, even writing, even if it's typed, right? There's somebody's consciousness put this into words, into music, whatever, and decided to lay it in this form. And it also moves you, energy that continues. And I think that's part of the priority of keeping these things. It's because the closer you are to the raw event, right? The first recording, the first writing, the manuscript, the picture, it's sort of transformative of us individuals. And of course, we carry that to the people we congregate with. So yeah, as for you in terms of space, because you started off your comment talking about space, I feel like it's the same thing, right? Earlier we were talking about Palestine, and part of the colonizing effort is to get them to vacate the space. There is a reality there that the body is more, it's information, but it's more than that, right? So yeah, that's my little ramble. What do you, what do you feel? Yeah.
I'll say some words. The body is the archive, right? So this is like a real live archive right here, and it's what I'm trying to preserve, along with all y'all, right? Like, y'all be so important to me. Like, my project is called the Radical Archive Project, aka TRAP. I moved to Atlanta thinking I was going to be trapping. And here I am trapping, right? But not in that way, but another way. So like, I don't know how to respond to that, but yeah, I think you're getting at what I'm trying to get at in like preserving this feeling, the warmness, the kind of alternate strategies of survival, like that is the most important thing. And the physical becomes like attached to that. It's how we can remember that. But I'm really just trying to get at this stuff that we can't at all touch, right? Like I'm trying to provoke memory. So you mentioned like handwriting. So one time I went to all my family members and I was like, okay, I want y'all to pick something that you inherited, right? Because I was doing this project on heirlooms, and everyone said, I don't have anything I inherited. Nobody ever gave me nothing. You know how people be. You're like, okay, yes, you do. And so once they thought about it for a while, there were things that they borrowed and never returned. There were things that, stuff started to emerge. So for my brother, he had a tie. It was his grandfather's tie. And it was a tie that his grandfather tied on his neck on the occasion of his aunt's funeral, because he showed up at the funeral with no tie on it. He was like, boy, you can't come to no funeral with no tie, so come in here. And he tied this tie on him. And as he was tying the tie on him, he was telling him like, you a man now, like you're going to have to be strong in these instances. And he said, in that moment, he's recounting this to me, that he could smell his cologne. And he remembered those words, and he was crying like, I haven't thought about this, right? So it was the tie, but it was also like, go get something, right, that you had. And then there was another one where there was a recipe, so like the handwriting. So all of those little things, I'm obsessed with that moment, right? And like the physical is trying to get at that, but it's really about that.
That's beautiful.
That's beautiful. I just wanted to say, I think, as someone that very unexpectedly lost multiple spaces this year and multiple homes, it only made that realization more strong that that is what we're trying to grasp, with the physical. Because I thought, I had so much of myself and didn't realize I had so much of myself wrapped into these different homes that I had in Atlanta. And so I'd be talking to someone, and I'd be like, yeah, I remember that little blue house that I lived next to, and it was next to a river, or my little yellow house. I have had all these different houses, all these different, residencies across Atlanta. And it took, losing all of them, and then ultimately my family making the very hard decision to sell our family land, of the realization of the memories that we have from that house, the things that we did, because the house stayed in my family for years, for centuries. So it's the house it's holding all these different memories, right? But then, someone else gets the house, and then kind of in a way it becomes theirs. Like the sink that I was bathed in, someone else is going to be bathed in it now. And they're going to take pictures of their baby being in the sink. And so it continues on in a way. And so I had to go through that pain of being really angry about it and really pissed off, and then coming to peace with this thing that belonged to us in the scheme of land, never really belonged to us, not for real, but this thing that belonged to us is now going to belong to someone else. But it doesn't take away the memories that we made in that physical space. And so I agree, that is the thing that we keep trying to grasp. Mm-hmm. And sometimes holding on to the physical too strongly you can forget that.
Yeah, but it's interesting how that's basically the basis of all librarianship. It's the longing for that thing that's gone. Yeah.
I was listening y'all have great reflections, so I'm just happy to hear what you're saying. Shady, you're talking about this like anxiety that you have sometimes around like feeling like you have to be the one to hold it, or maybe even the one to document it. And I think it's always that like that pressure you might feel when you're at a concert and you're like, oh, this feels so good. I want to memorialize it for forever. So let me take a really shitty camera photo of it or video of it. Or do I just be present, right? And like, so I deal with that a lot. And to me, I feel like one of the things that has been a good middle ground. My main practice is as oral historian, and for me, what that means is like I don't always have to be like if we're enjoying a party together, if we're enjoying dinner together, I don't always have to take a photograph to make sure that that moment is remembered because it's within us. And if I come to you 5 years later and be like, hey, you remember that dinner? I hope you remember. But also that means that then the memory is within ourselves, right? And so I think that's why I value oral history so much. And it's where I've poured most of my attention as a memory worker. I think similarly to that too, what you were saying, Cam, around like, yeah, the different ways that we might hold on to something that might not be a direct reflection of what the event is, such as like a photograph of an event or a handwritten note about an event. Land and objects that wouldn't immediately denote a type of event or object. This winter, we were working on our garden and we decided to plant some tomatoes. We're looking through the seed catalog and we noticed one of the tomatoes is called Aunt Lou's Underground Railroad tomatoes.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? What?
The Aunt Lou Underground Railroad tomatoes. Those are the seeds that we decided to buy, and apparently they have connections to the Underground Railroad. They were an heirloom tomato that was kept as a seed and brought down generation after generation after generation. So we decided to plant those. It kicked our butt. We enjoyed like half a tomato, right, Yam? Yeah. It didn't yield a lot. But there was something about like, I wonder what the power of eating a fruit that comes from that lineage means, right? And so I think, I'm also trying to engage with memory and the physical outside of the dusty books and, dusty photographs and other objects as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I guess to open it up a little bit, unless I don't know, you have any other questions? If you could tell every person in this room to prioritize, let's do two types of media that you think is like this is, concentrate on this. What would they be? Yeah, just two. Be like, hey, if you're gonna keep anything, keep this.
Okay. Your favorite clothes. I think, it lives on the body. It is imbued with so many memories. It literally has our DNA in it. I love, and it's sad because we don't really have we got SCAD, but SCAD has their own priorities. But we don't really have a repository that's invested in collecting textiles here in Atlanta. And we have all these film and TV studios with all these costumes that we need for me, and especially working with Black people, Black performance, Black culture, when we don't have the agreements, the contracts, the records, textual material, the recording, the audio file. A lot of times we had what we wore. So I feel like we should be trying to preserve that first, what lived on the body of the person. I also was responsible for processing, and don't tell nobody, y'all, but I was processing Dr. King's clothes. Bruh. The oh, I can't tell y'all specifics, but first of all, you know, the playlist I had playing was like 60s, like R&B, and like to the ties and the suits and the undergarments and the swim shorts and the socks, like everything. I was like, you know, he wore this, you know. I felt so close. I also processed all his 50 degrees, y'all. He got like 50 degrees because this man, honorary degrees upon honorary degrees. But the honorary degrees was over there, and I'm like, but his socks, his ties. He has so many ties, and I get it, right? Like the man was a professional. But those are the things that mattered the most to me because it was like I was so close. I was so close to his body, you know. So I got one. That's one.
I will put it under two categories. For me, one of the categories is study. So what is something that you can refer to regularly as good study? For me, I have a handful of books and like canonical texts, and when I was reading Parable of the Sower and I was thinking, which one will go in my go bag? I had to identify two, but I think the one that actually has been consistent is This Bridge Called My Back. As an anthology, my favorite. It is, in my opinion, evergreen. So that's one category, a study or grounding, right? Like something that just makes you feel really rooted. And it might not be a book, right? It might be, I don't know, photograph or it could be multiple things. Yes. And then the other thing I would say is proof of self or like proof of community. Like what's an object that, an item that helps you feel connected to who you are and also who you've been surrounded by. And for me, that does end up being like a collection of Polaroids where I'm just like, oh, look at my people. But it could be a myriad of things. So I would say those two categories. Keep that with you and have it always. Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready. Yes, I have two. The first one I'm going to say is zines. Y'all, please hold on to your zines. Zines were some of the first form of, as a queer person in the queer community, of collecting our history, of telling our stories, of zines and independent publishing were, also pretty much how the Harlem Renaissance got started, right? It was a group of Black authors and Black artists that noticed that they weren't getting any work. And so they came together and started their own printing presses and started publishing their own books because they were like, we're not gonna do this anymore. And I think we are seeing this right now, right? With the NEA losing grants and funding and pretty much being disbanded and not a thing anymore. We're going to have to go back to having our own community-centered based publishing efforts, and that starts with zines, and they're so easy to do and they're so easy to make. If you want a zine on how to make a zine, I will send you one. I have them. It's in the Free Black Library. Two, I'm gonna say one, I might get some boos for this. Please don't boo me. Film, it's so important. I think we don't take into account how much film and TV shows and that type of media influences us and it influences our decisions down to the things that we buy, down to the things that we support, down to the people that we support, down to the people that people vote for politically. Movies and TV shows, we definitely need to start giving them way more credit for influencing things. And so, I would say if you have a favorite movie and you want to, there's actually someone on Instagram that teaches you how to do this. I will send you that information too. There's someone that teaches you how to find your favorite movies digitally and then put them onto VHS tapes so that you have that and you can revisit that. So it's like that's also a way too. Cultural criticism started with film, y'all. It started with bell hooks and it started with film. So yeah, hold on to film and zines.
Awesome. Well, do you think we have time for a couple? Yeah, okay. If anybody has any questions, there's a little Q&A mic right here. Sir.
So more of a comment. than a question. You put my mind toward this when you talked about the fire at the archive. I'm Ed Hall, and I have a serious library. I had free lawyering when I worked for Newsweek magazine, so the first thing I did was get a will. And my will addresses the disposition of my library. If you are a serious book collector or a serious collector of ephemera, have a will. We live in an era where people care less and less about books. They are considered disposable, particularly by members of your family who don't know you have a serious library. Address the disposition of your library. Be prepared to go at any time, because we don't know the future. And the reason I know this is true, at my Goodwill, I regularly can see, I saw a shelf of poetry, all by black women, all signed to the same person. You know what that means? That person died. Their family took those books to Goodwill, when those books should be here. So, protect your stuff, have a will, and this lesson comes from Ralph Ellison by way of Richard Ford. Ralph Ellison's second novel was published as a fragment because when he was working on it, his house burned down. He had to recreate it, which he never managed to do before he died. It was published in a fragmentary form. Richard Ford shared that story and said, that's why all my manuscripts live in the freezer. If you have an Altadena-style fire, that's not going to save it. But if you have a routine house fire, the freezer is in fact as close to a fireproof box as you don't have to buy because you already have it.
Hi. I came in because it said the future is physical. I came in here. The thing is, a couple of years ago, I lost my husband and my son. But we have a collection of books, or maybe about 500, dealing with black culture, African art, books that were collected in London and Africa and the Caribbean. And so I need help, because I need help to save the books. Like, I've kept them for these years now, and they're in storage. But they're a threat of well, I've kept them for a few years. So imagine keeping something for a few years in a storage. But it's getting rough now to keep paying the monthly thing to keep the books. But the books are valuable. I want to say that the Green Fund, y'all know of the Green Fund from AU? They did bring some of the books here to Atlanta. But the rest of the books are in D.C. in a storage. And so I'm looking for help. Like you said, they should be here. And that's why I held on to them. I'm 70 years old. But I held on to them because I said, I'm not going to let them go. So when I saw the future is physical, I said, I got to come in here because maybe I could get help so that the books don't just go to waste. Because a lot of valuable books, like I said, from Europe, from the Caribbean, from Africa, some from the United States dealing with black art, culture, history, and yeah. And I just got the idea to even say this when I was sitting here listening to you all, because I was like, I've held on to them and paid all that money all these years just keeping them in the storage. But I got to do something, better than that now.
What do you guys think? Okay, I guess a little pitch for the Auburn Avenue Research Library and the archives. Oh, me? Yeah, that's right, I guess. You can always donate it to the archives, to a particular library that you know will take good care of them. I propose this one, especially if it's related to anything Africana. But if it's sentimental, that's to me the part that struck me. I wouldn't know how to, I don't know. Do you know any services, any people, any? I mean, I could put you in contact with Derek Mosley. He's our head of archives here. He's more than knowledgeable on all things, whether to retain storage and everything. So, call Derek Mosley during our regular operating hours, Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. So I wish I could be more help, but I appreciate that.
Hello. Thank you so much. This was really moving for me. I'm transitioning to try and become an archivist or a librarian soon, so this is really exciting. It feels very validating because I feel so excited. So thank you so much, and sorry if I get a little emotional during this question. My grandmother passed away earlier this year, and she was a really funny lady, so she'd be really mad at me for getting emotional right now. But my older sister asked her years ago if she could tell her secrets. Like, she asked my grandma, like, tell me your secrets, because she had multiple lives. And my grandma said, like, I'm gonna die with my secrets. Like, you're not gonna know any of them. And she said it in a funny way. It wasn't mean, but it was like, I'm gonna die with my secrets. And then she began to develop dementia, and like, really, we couldn't tell the difference between what she was saying. And so I think what you were talking about earlier about like the tie and those stories is so much about like grief, like longing to understand or to know. And as like a historian or researcher, like I respect people's right to privacy, to like their own histories. And then, but I also think of the history of like respectability in Black women's history, and like feeling like feeling so ashamed of certain things in your history because of systemic reasons. And so I guess like my question kind of is like how to accept things we like will never know, or like never know, or never be able to keep. And I guess it's also about trauma of like fires and loss and things like that. So as librarians and archivists, oral historians, like how do we accept things we won't know? Thank you.
I mean, that's what I'm talking about. The self-care. That's why, like, I went to librarian school, archival studies, and we didn't have too much about self-care, and I'm mad about that, I think it has to be part of your practice. That letting go, that restoration, that dealing with the trauma. Like, I always say, because I teach in academic spaces, community spaces, and I'm teaching about archives, and I feel like, when we teach about archives, we teach about like the great parts of archives and like why we should do this and why it's important. And it's like, yeah, but the violence, the trauma, the erasure, right? Like that's what we need to foreground. So you don't keep replicating the trauma, the erasure, the violence to your own body, right? So I would just encourage you to find those rituals, that restore you, to as much time as you take remembering, you need to take restoring, right? If you're 3 hours of processing, I'm gonna need you to do 3 hours of something else that brings you back to the center, because it is that inner work that you're doing. I'm learning more and more about shadow work now, but it's gotta be hand in hand, I think, or else you're going to keep doing the same things that have been done to us unconsciously, right? I'm constantly making silences and gaps in the record, right? I know it. When I recount a story to somebody, I'm like, ooh, but I don't even know how I should tell you this, because I'm, I have my own, experiences, interpretations in the story that I'm telling you. And I really want your honest opinion, but I know I'm biasing it right now. So it's that, you can't, performance study says you can never recreate the moment. You got to just somehow be willing to live in the moment and like give it up to everyone, right? Like we're all a part of this. So it's not just on you to remember, and your body does remember, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say I agree. Because this is work that we're doing. Like as much time that you dedicate to this work, you have to also attempt to dedicate even more time to taking care of yourself and self-care, because there isn't anything in anything studies about the grief that comes with that at all, or the questions that you might ask yourself, like, if you going through a queer archive and finding a picture of a couple and thinking about like, oh, I wonder were they together. Like I have a friend that did this. She found a picture of two women together, and she was really like studying like the look between them, and she was just like, history will say that they were roommates, but I know these two women were like lovers. Like she was really, and I was like, it's that grief of like, and she was like at a point crying about it too, because it was like, you'll never know, it's accepting that we will never know.
And just to respond to that, like those descriptive practices, right? Like how was it described? How do you describe it? How does the institution want you to describe it? Like again, constantly, how do you describe it in a way that it won't be intentionally erased? Like all of those things in archival practice that we're constantly dealing with, right? I was working in corporate archives, and there was things that we were finding that I know people didn't want to know about, and my staff would come to me and say, "Hey, what should we do about this this insurance policy on this little black girl that was a slave?" And I would be like, "Okay, now I know they don't want to know about this, and if we tell this company about these records, they're going to say, destroy it. So how do I protect this document in a way that allows it to survive by maybe not describing it?" Like it's all of these things. So yeah.
I guess your question resonated with me because it's a very similar instance with my grandfather. And I would say don't let it go. I would say let it transform you, because there's something about silence. We're so overwhelmed with noise that we realize how essential silence is to life. And this is literally the space in between sentences in a book. This is the space in between songs in an album, the space between you and me, right? There's something about, that's the mystery right there. You'll never really know anybody. Even your best friend, you're not going to granularly know everything there is about them. And that space is what allows you to fall in love with them, to remember them, to cherish the mystery. Cherish the mystery. So keep your grandmother in your memory, keep pictures, and whatever secrets she didn't tell you, let that propel you to continue loving her and let it transform you. I guess, Gula, do you think we got one more, or are we good? One more? Okay. Yeah, I apologize. Yeah, we're...
Hi, Cam.
Hi.
There's so much pressure of being the last person. I was in Brazil for a while, for 3 months, recently, and I've been before, and so there's this really weird translator position that I was in, because I was not exactly a tourist, but I was around a lot of tourists, and so I was translating between them and locals a lot. I was staying at a hostel for a while, and I was in this really weird position of being with my Brazilian friends, who would joke French people always have a camcorder. All of the French tourists are always filming each other all the time. What are they doing? They're not doing anything. They're sitting eating bean soup. Why are they? It was just a silly thing. And all of the Brazilians who worked at the hostel were kind of like me, we're working day in and day out. The tourists would be where are we gonna go to eat? And we're we haven't eaten at any of these restaurants because it costs 100 reais. That is more than we make a week. You know what I mean? It's a hard position to be in. And also as someone who'd been before, maybe I was looking through different eyes than them. And so I think sometimes with archiving or with saving things, you're well, I'm not gonna save the mundane things, It's just me and Luma talking about, well, I can't afford my laundry, but do you wanna split? Which is such a Brazilian thing, right? To be let's do a discount, let's split, let's pay half now, let's ask the guy if we can get cheaper, And so I'm not gonna document that, so then maybe I'm not like the French tourist. And I was am I doing tourism right? Am I a tourist? I had this weird feeling, right? And I met this guy, and he was doing his degree in engineering, and he was only in the city for 3 days. And he was oh, I really hate that I'm here so short amount of time. I wish I could see more like you, India. And he was look what I found. He came back to the house. He's there's a scrapbook, and it's already been X-Acto knife cut out, certain images. Someone clearly has taken time doing this. I said, where did you find this? He's there's a free library, one of the little ones. I said, where? I've lived here for a month. I haven't seen it. And he's it's right around the corner. I can walk you there. It's right there. I'm I'm looking through the wrong eyes. You know what I mean? And I was like seeing him cut it out and paste it, and he like really quickly was making a collage. I was like, I thought you were an engineer. He's like, yeah, I just do this as like an art practice. And I was like, wow, it's so cool. In like 20 years, someone's gonna find this and be like, you backpacked in Brazil and were like studying seeds and like taught yourself a second language? That's so cool. And he's like, I think that's why I do it, to like maybe someday my grandchildren will have it. You know, like creating with the intention of maybe this will be an archive someday, you know? That's all.
Vault mentality. I go back to Prince. He called it vault mentality. Anyway, but
That was beautiful. I was just like going through life with you. I really enjoyed that story.
They're that type of person, yes.
I really enjoyed that. There is one thing that I did say that I wanted to do today on this stage. I wanted to tell y'all about the Radical Archive Project's Rooted in Memory workshop series that's coming up next year. So like I said, the intention of the project is to teach people how to do this work. So there's workshops all through the year next year. They're once every other month. And you can find more information about that on my website, theradicalarchive.com. And I brought y'all bookmarks. So I made these bookmarks, and I'll put them here as we close out. But I really, please take them. Take as many as you want. There's different ones, and I literally made them for you. So thank you.
sure, you're right.
Hi, my name is Layla. Atlanta's my home. I'm a Crawford Long baby. That's Emory for y'all that don't know ball. I was taken by your question of hoarding versus collecting, or how to prevent hoarding. And I thought perhaps the difference is the fear of loss versus the courage to share. My grandmother, who, God rest her soul, Murray Henderson, she, maybe it's not hoarders off TLC, but she definitely had that bedroom that's not a bedroom, because you can't lay down on the bed because she has 20 million dining sets that are stacked there, and it's the fear of loss. What if somebody needs this one day? But perhaps if we let that propel us into the courage to share, why don't we have a dinner party tomorrow? Then you can get rid of 19 of your 20 diner sets, you know? So yeah, that's just what I thought of. Thank you.
That's a beautiful note to end on. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge and everything. Thank you for being here with us. All right.
Hold on, real quick. I'll take a moment to also plug myself. Buy my demo. Follow the Free Black Library on Instagram. It's all lowercase, the Free Black Library. We have an event calendar. I'm still taking volunteers. If you are interested, hit me up. I can send you the form. I'm taking volunteers in both cities, so that means if you know people that are local to Atlanta and also Nashville, hit me up, because that is the entire goal with the Free Black Library. I am trying to bridge both Black communities and both POC communities, so yes.
Follow Georgia Dust's Instagram. We do dope stuff. Yeah, Georgia_Dusk. We have really awesome oral histories. My woo came from one of our people who did an oral history. Shout out to Mango. Yeah, Georgia_Dusk. Or georgiadust.com.
At the Radical Library, at the Radical Archive, and www.theradicalarchive.com. Yeah. I'll have y'all bookmarks for up here.